皆様、こんにちは。
Hello, everybody. Webinar, the CSC is a game changer. The latest trends of the threats in the game and software industry and the diversifying threat and measures is today's topic. Thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Moro. I'll be the MC for today. Before diving in, we have some housework announcements. We would be offering multiple language interpretations simultaneously. If you prefer, please choose the language that you choose. We would like to hear from the option box at the bottom. Also, if you have any questions, you can type in your questions in the chat box. We would be asking your questions during the Q&A after the presentations are over, so we will be addressing your questions then. And also, if you have any technical issues, you can also type in the chat box, and the operator would get back to you. Now, I'd like to introduce to you today's speakers. We have Gianna Majorano, the Business Development Manager from CSC, and the Senior Legal Department Manager, Ms. Marjorie Martin from Banji Inc. And we also have Alex Martin from ESA, who is in charge of IP protection and security programming management. First of all, Gianni from CSC will be presenting. He is the consultant of the CSC's digital brand services, and while he engages in domain security and online protection, he is also addressing the issues confronted by the game industry, which are very unique, and he is a very enthusiastic gamer, and he would be talking about the brand infringement dedicated to the software industry.
Forgive me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining what should be a unique and fun conversation around the video game industry. On behalf of all of us here at CSC, thank you very much, and we hope you find the webinar valuable and useful in your place of businesses. As you may be aware, CSC is the leading provider for corporate domain name security and governance, as well as online brand and fraud protection across the globe. Our clients range across every industry vertical. CSC has a particular focus on supporting and protecting the most recognized brands in the video game world. Our understanding of both the challenges that face the people behind the scenes, making the business work, and the steps it takes to overcome them have made CSC the place to be when stopping and preventing cybercrime. There are several aspects that make the gaming industry unique in its challenges. Excuse me just for a moment. Okay, should be good to go. All right. There are several aspects that make the gaming industry unique in its challenges from online and offline threats. As technology rapidly changes, so too does the technology that both deliver and breach gaming technology. Gaming, while a massive industry, still finds itself broken up into communities of gamers who are intertwined in the Venn diagram of video games, though are often wholly segregated otherwise. Get off my lawn is an attitude that gamers often have when it comes to any corporate or legal involvement. And gamers typically do not agree with the business side of gaming even if the goal is to create a safer and sustainable environment for the businesses that support the games people know and love. Gaming is also used as a social platform for content creators, influencers, TikTokers, and more, which further muddies the waters of what should or should not be allowed for gaming companies. The evolution of the types of ways that criminals or those trying to create ill-begotten games in the gaming world is an interesting one. As it started with hardware, putting microchips and other types of hardware to adjust code or sell items that were fake, required a specific expertise in order to execute. When compact discs became one of the main forms of delivering games, CD burners posed a particular challenge as how do you prevent these CDs from being read? Now, everything is done digitally and online, with the most lucrative types of issues occurring at scale and are not tied to any physical good or product. In this webinar, you will hear about some of the unique ways that gaming companies are being attacked, and more importantly, what can be done to combat these issues. Many of the smaller and even the larger gaming companies do not have a fully operational brand protection program. We will answer the questions of how do we get started and what are different ways to clean up the internet for my client or for my company. The first part of this is the types of infringement facing games and gaming companies. And that's the first area of our conversation today. The ways that gaming companies are seeing problems online is not limited to the contents of this webinar, and many of the main issues will be discussed. The primary focus will be around unauthorized digital goods, which is a broad statement that encompasses basically everything that can be transacted from a game virtually, as opposed to a tangible product. One of the most basic forms of this was during the CD burner days. You would get a unique CD key that could only be used in order to access one time to access the program. If you had a unique key, it didn't matter whether you had the game itself. You could use this key to gain access to the system. Often, these keys are sold on third-party marketplaces or standalone sites. What that means for the world today is that the keys are being sold or are done so illegitimately or not in concordance with the standards set forth by the gaming company. This obviously poses an issue as the keys could be fake, or it is not being tracked in any meaningful way, or the company isn't making money from leaked keys, just to name a few. Unauthorized digital goods can also take the form of more modern issues, which are things like game skins or other cosmetics sold within the game. Today, microtransactions are used to create revenue streams for gaming companies. These types of transactions didn't exist previously for many reasons. First of all, games started offline, and it wasn't possible to do in-game transactions of any kind regardless. Naturally, that changed, and most transactions now occur online. Additionally, games now have the ability to be updated in real time to provide these cosmetics to be unlocked upon purchase or as part of a routine update. What is happening here comes basically across the internet. Other forms of digital goods are the games themselves, in-game currency, an entire gaming account, and anything the game offers as a bonus within its own ecosystem. Standalone websites are a big part of the problem. These sites could potentially look like a real site with content that appears to be a safe place to transact. The sites themselves will have logos, downloads, previews of whatever the site is trying to sell, and more. The issue further exacerbates itself as the URLs can contain the brand in it, or perhaps some other abbreviation to make it look more legitimate. The issue is these sites are not authorized to sell the cosmetics, are a source of malicious software, and create a black market of sorts that are not a part of a legitimate business practice. This can also take the form of hacks and cheats within a game. That can cause even more problems for game servers where people are playing together online. A simple example of this is an aimbot that allows you to always shoot in a particular spot, or if a competitor walks in front of your sites, to fire automatically. E-commerce sites are not a new place for these kinds of issues, and it started in the form of physical goods and continues with merchandise, which we will discuss later. Fake CDs, modification chips, fake games were all bought and sold on eBay for $1 or more. This has changed to people selling CD keys themselves, in-game currency, access to events, and more. E-commerce sites are a focus of every gaming company I work with and are an issue for the larger gaming community as well. Sellers are able to create revenue by listing digital goods and selling them for a profit or to make money from an unsuspecting person. As with every company today, social media has caused a massive issue for gaming companies, as these social media handles can brandish company marks and logos and appear though they are affiliated when they are not. These bad actors will use the good branding to gain either a social media presence themselves or use the gaming mark to perform quick strike infringement. This can cause unsuspecting buyers to click on links to send them to phishing sites, be redirected to the sites mentioned before that are not authorized, broker false transactions with unknown third parties, and again create a buying ecosystem that puts the end user in a compromising position. Across all three of these areas, one of the most prevalent aspects of the sales are the sales of unauthorized digital goods is with account resales. This can be done on websites, e-commerce platforms, and social media. In the example of in-game currency, an individual will farm or perform a repetitive and lucrative in-game action to gain wealth and then sell this account to a person who doesn't exactly have the desire to perform the grinding it takes to achieve such amounts. While this is frowned upon in many gaming circles, it doesn't stop people from doing it and taking advantage of it. Globally, this issue has created a bit of a sub-profession, or in some instances, modern slave labor, as people are forced to perform such actions as part of an overall business plan. This is something that has been seen in places like China. The problems that gaming companies face are not surprisingly intellectual property in nature, though one that is quite unique to the gaming world comes in the form of streamers and influencers. IP infringement happens every day on sites like YouTube and Twitch. For many of these types of infringements, there is an all press is good press sentiment. The reason being, gaming and content creators go hand in hand, help promote the game, create far more engagement for the game than previously, and allow for the gaming companies to become more human. In most instances, this is for the better of the entire gaming ecosystem. However, sometimes there's an issue with an influencer that crosses the line. Does it cross it a little bit? Does it cross it a lot? That is the gray area within which the legal teams live and must make decisions in a tactful manner. Who wants to piss off the YouTuber with 10 million followers? However, just because they have a following doesn't mean they should break major rules or the law. Oftentimes, you will see these people selling products that they shouldn't be selling, which leads to another issue, which are physical goods. T-shirts, shoes, hoodies, cat ears, jackets, replicas, doodads, and tchotchkes are sold every day, and many of them are counterfeit or legitimate. This one's real. These are sold everywhere across all major online paths, e-commerce, standalone sites, and social media sites. It could be with a logo, a graphic, a phrase, and more that allows for someone to capitalize off of a brand that should not be. This is something that affects virtually every gaming company that has a presence online. Even smaller companies are at risk, as their games become more successful in any way, bad actors will flock to them. These physical goods represent millions in revenue and millions in revenue lost. What we are seeing across marketplaces are bulk business-to-business sites selling huge quantities of knockoffs, which are then parsed out across business-to-consumer sites. Whether the company is a AAA producing juggernaut or a fledgling independent gamer, there are many issues facing them. For smaller games that catch fire, it's a dream come true. This is where we want to urge the gaming community to be aware that as you scale, so too does your infringement and threat landscape. Many of the independent developers are not even aware that such problems exist, which makes them prime targets for cyber criminals to hamper their brand and make a quick buck. Thank you.
Gianni, ありがとうございます。
Jenny, thank you. The infringement of IPs in the game industry can be seen everywhere. We understood. And so what kind of brand protection is necessary? We would like to move on to the next speaker. Let me introduce to you the next speaker. We have Ms. Marjorie Martin from Bungie Inc. She works for the biggest, one of the biggest video manufacturers who created Halo and Destiny, Bungie Incorporated. She has also been involved in the procurement of the products and services at big manufacturers such as Nintendo and others. So we would like to hear from her the building a brand protection program from the ground up. The floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Marjorie Martin, as I was introduced, and I'm the Senior Manager of Legal Operations for Bungie Incorporated, maker of Halo, Destiny, and several other video games. I manage staff and all non-attorney areas of Bungie's legal department, and I've been working in the video game industry for most of my career. Before I joined Bungie in 2019, I did not know what a corporate brand protection program was. I've been asked to describe my journey from literally knowing nothing about brand protection to overseeing Bungie's corporate program. I hope my story is helpful to you. Let me start at the beginning. Shortly after I joined Bungie, the company announced that they were dissolving the relationship with Activision Blizzard. Activision had been Bungie's publisher and had been providing brand protection services as part of that relationship. My manager Bungie's general counsel, assigned the responsibility of creating a brand protection program to me. I was asked to get this set up very quickly as Activision's support was ending in just a few months. I worked with my manager to better understand what the program should include and gathered the names of key internal and external contacts that I should meet with to help determine scope and direct my next steps. Assessing the current situation. I met with our consumer products and community teams to find out how they felt about our current brand protection and to determine what their pain points were. To put it plainly, they were unhappy with our current program and had a very long list of infringing items being sold that was causing great concern. I also met with Activision's brand protection manager and their outside brand protection counsel to find out how they'd been managing the takedown of infringing merchandise and other IP. These discussions proved more difficult considering our relationship was strained during this wind down period. One important piece of advice that I did receive along the way was to have Bungie join the Entertainment Software Association, the ESA. My next step was to identify risks. So during my investigative meetings with internal and external teams, I gathered information about infringing items that were creating the greatest risk for the company. At that time, three-dimensional replicas of weapons from our game Destiny 2 were being made and sold for display or cosplay use. These replicas were of great concern to us, not only because these one-to-one weapon replicas infringed on Bungie's intellectual property, but some could be mistaken for real weapons and used for nefarious reasons. Other risks included counterfeit merchandise based on originals that Bungie created specifically to be sold or awarded to players who achieved a particular achievement level within our game. Those particular items were not made available to the public. Other areas of risk included merchandise from t-shirts and pins to streaming and monetizing our original game's music soundtrack on YouTube. Determining my next steps. I determined that brand protection for Bungie thus far, which had been handled by one small law firm, had been relatively ineffective. It did not appear that there was any regular monitoring of websites that sold infringing items, and the few cease and desist letters, also known as C&Ds, the few letters that had been sent were few and again ineffective. As you might find yourself, the enforcement process can feel like a game of whack-a-mole in that one listing is taken down and another pops up in its place. It became very clear that I needed a vendor to help us. Vendor vetting. As you might find, there are many vendors out there that claim to be great at protecting your intellectual property in the marketplace. I found it quite difficult to know where to start. So, like so many people, I searched the internet and contacted at least 10 different vendors who claimed they could properly support our business. When meeting with these vendors, I found that most had no experience working with the video game industry, and I'd really hoped to find someone who had. This is where our Entertainment Software Association membership became very valuable. I found that they had a working group that focused on brand protection. I had a conversation with my contact at the ESA about the frustrations I was experiencing locating a brand protection vendor who had industry experience. It turns out he knew someone. He gave me the name of a company that provided brand protection and had knowledge of our industry, CSC. I was familiar with CSC because they'd been in business for many years, and I had experience working with them for corporate entity support. Ultimately, CSC was the vendor that I chose to partner with. But before I negotiated and signed the contract, there was more work to be done. Once you've seen all the product demonstrations, had all of the internal conversations, and have narrowed your list of vendors down to 1 to 3, ask for and talk to the references they provide to better understand the experience that their other customers have had. This information can be vital. Ask how the contracting process was. Ask about implementation. Ask about the vendor's service and communication. All of these things are important. There is a true leap of faith that you take when signing with a new vendor, especially when they will be supporting an area that you are still becoming familiar with. Setting service expectations. How much of my day will be consumed reviewing and marking items for takedown? How do I get in touch with the team if we locate an infringing item that needs to be taken down? How often will we meet? Will I receive regular reporting? Once my questions have been answered and expectations have been set, I worked with contract counsel, my manager, and the vendor to negotiate and sign a contract. What's next? Information that will greatly help your brand protection vendor to clearly identify both legitimate and infringing listings. Whitelists. A whitelist is a list of websites that legitimately sell your merchandise, products, or stream the company's content. Licensed partners. So a list of every licensor and manufacturer of your company's product and other IP in the marketplace. Keywords and images. A list of product names, brands, logo images, and other keywords that will help your vendor find infringing merchandise or listings. This can include a copy of all the company's trademarks and applicable copyrights. The more that you give your vendor, the better they are able to help you. Other helpful partners. Finding a great brand protection vendor is vital, but it's also important to have other partners ready when you need them. Private investigators, also known as boots on the ground. These experienced professionals can serve C&Ds worldwide and perform deep dive investigations if and when that becomes necessary. Their network of contacts can prove invaluable. Internal input. We find that our players and employees often find infringing items and truly want to report them to our legal department. It's a good idea to create a channel where this information can easily be delivered to you for reporting to your brand protection vendor. Our vendor set up an email distribution group that includes both internal stakeholders and our vendor's analyst. So when we locate infringing listings, it's very easy to report them and have them taken down quickly. Other related problems that are specific to the video game industry, which Gianni just spoke of, include boosting services. For many video game companies, boosting services, also known as carry services or Sherpas, violate our terms of service, as they require a player to give those providers their game credentials, logins, to level up their character and carry them further along in the game. Cheat makers. Nobody likes a cheater. Most of our players and community strongly dislike players who use cheating software, including aimbots. Bungie is one of the first video game companies who has actively gone after these sellers in court. And our comprehensive litigation approach is more aggressive and is showing promise. At Bungie, using cheat software is an offense that can result in the player being banned from the game. Taking down these folks has proved quite difficult, and it's an ongoing problem for our industry. The now of Bungie's brand protection program. From the day I was assigned the responsibility of creating a brand protection program to signing with a vendor took 3.5 months. Implementation took another few weeks. Initially, and as I expected, I spent about an hour a day reviewing and marking items for takedown. But after only a few weeks, that time was reduced to less than an hour a week, as the vendor's analysts became familiar with our IP and business and learned which listings to take down without my input. Now I have a legal coordinator who monitors the brand protection dashboard twice a week and coordinates with internal teams to identify and confirm whether unfamiliar items are infringing or legitimate. We receive monthly reporting and meet with our brand protection team and receive a summary of that reporting, which is routed to internal stakeholders. I am by no means a brand protection expert, and as a difficult challenge, ended as just an area that I managed during my day without much worry. I hope my story was interesting and helpful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. So I understand it took much more time to find a vendor and to make a contract, but your hard work paid off. Thank you very much. So let me introduce the next speaker. The next speaker is Mr. Alex Martin, Program Manager for the Intellectual Property Protection and Security Team at the Entertainment Software Association, or ESA. ESA is the trade association that represents the U.S. video game industry. He's been with ESA for more than 5 years and working over 30 video game publishers from around the world. And he's now going to present he's going to do his presentation entitled "Leveling Up Enforcement." So, Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening. My name is Alex Martin. I am Program Manager for the Intellectual Property Protection Security Team at the Entertainment Software Association, or ESA for short. I've been in the industry for 5 years, all in the enforcement space, and specializing in enforcing on digital assets across multiple platforms online. My first console was the original PlayStation, where I played Ape Escape and Hot Shots Golf 2. Currently, I am playing Gotham Knights, Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and I've been playing Cyberpunk 2077 since day one. So who is the ESA? We are the trade association that represents the US video game industry. We work with over 30 video game publishers from around the world, including Sony, Nintendo, Epic, Take-Two. In the case of companies like Sony and Nintendo, we work with their US offices. ESA is based in Washington, DC, and along with IP enforcement, we handle policy issues and put on our annual video game conference, E3, in Los Angeles. A fun fact about ESA is that it was formed in 1994 out of the US government's concern for violence in video games, most notably Mortal Kombat and Night Trap. The Interactive Digital Software Association, which was later changed to ESA, formed to avoid government regulation. Why is video game enforcement tricky? The short answer is that because every publisher does it a little bit different, which means bad actors using different methods to not get caught. ESA is in a unique position because we enforce for several different and competing video game publishers. They each operate differently, and their strategies bring unique challenges. In my role at ESA, I oversee our unauthorized digital goods, or UDGs, as we call them. which attempts to disrupt the sale of video game digital assets outside of their ecosystem. These include cheat services, such as aimbots, account boosting, in-game items, digital accounts, and virtual currencies. We have forced on standalone websites built by bad actors and those selling on popular marketplaces such as eBay and Amazon and more. Like I mentioned before, every company sets up their ecosystem differently and as a result brings unique problems to enforcement. For example, you can buy V-Bucks, which is Fortnite's in-game currency, with real money, but it cannot be traded inside the game's ecosystem. You would have to sell and hand over the credentials of your entire account to someone, as we call a digital account resale, to give them those V-Bucks. However, many MMOs, such as World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV, allow authorized trading between player characters for virtual currency and in-game items. Games such as FIFA or Madden have in-game auction houses for trading in-game items, digital player cards for Ultimate Team. To enforce properly, you need to know how bad actors are selling and using your digital assets, and specifically, how those items are being exchanged once the item is sold. This not only helps you know what keywords to scan for online, but allows you to identify unusual trends inside your game. Disruption is ESA's strategy. There are two main areas we see people selling unauthorized digital goods. Standalone websites, as you see in the website depicted here, and marketplaces. CSC handles our marketplace enforcement. We work with them to create a list of titles that video game publishers have approved for us to enforce on. In this area, we disrupt the sale. For example, a listing pops up on eBay for an in-game digital asset, and through CSC's magic, they work with eBay to take down the listing before it can make a sale. This type of disruption has an established workflow. These listings are usually the same across different types of UDGs or different video games. However, a vendor such as CSC can help find patterns and trends on how bad actors are attempting to avoid being seen by us. We've seen listings offer a paperclip plus 1 million FIFA coins. We've seen purposeful misspellings. We've seen images using a blend of custom artwork and copyrighted images. On standalone websites, it is a little more difficult. In the US, we have the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, also known as the DMCA, written into law in 1998. It allows right holders to remove unauthorized use of their copyrighted works. On standalone websites, disruption is not only disrupting the exchange of money, but how bad actors try to reach new customers. On standalone websites, there are many moving parts working together, including the hosting provider, the payment processor, social media, advertising, and more. One strategy is to start a conversation with the site operator, and we do try to do this with varying levels of success. But also we use the DMCA to make the platforms the site is using, such as PayPal, Trustpilot, or Zendesk, to disable the accounts associated with the website. Through the hosting provider, we can remove copyrighted images to make the site seem less legitimate. We can remove payment processors to force potential customers to use crypto. And if we can remove their customer chatbot, it's harder to get questions answered. We continue to build our enforcement portfolio, which also includes building relationships with each of these platforms so we can escalate tricky situations. My contact information is displayed here. I am always happy to answer questions, and if you're ever in the DC area, we can definitely play some games together. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. So the bad actors are doing their best to try to get away with their cheat activities and infringement activities. And I believe long years of experience is necessary in order to address these issues. And I believe by doing so, it helps us to eliminate those infringing products from being circulated in the market and prevent them from being engaged in their legal activities. We have several questions raised in the chat box, so we would like to share those questions with you. The questions are raised by the audience to the three speakers. So for those of you who have questions, please type in your questions in the chat box. I would like to give you some time for you to type in your questions. So once we collect the questions, we would like to ask the speakers those questions. So we would like to spend a few minutes. And we would like you to spend a few minutes typing in your question. Thank you very much. We have several questions coming in, so I would like to share those questions with you. First of all, the first question is a question for Gianni. To what extent is exercising of rights possible? Is it just about a matter of shutting down a page, or do you have to do it gradually in phases? Gianni, can you answer this question, please?
But I'm not able to see a translation of the question. If you might be able to do that.
すいません。
There was also a question directed at Marjorie and Alex in the meantime.
One moment, please.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Jenny, hold on. はい、聞こえます。少々お待ちください。
Yes, I hear you. One moment, please.
Okay, perhaps the first question should be for Marjorie. after using the services, do you have indicators of success that you use to evaluate, and have they changed over time?
Well, can I just go? I'm just going to go. The reporting that I spoke of is what we use to measure success. I get a monthly report that tells me how many listings were actioned or taken down, the compliance percentage, and also the value of those listings. So over time, I can see month by month the value, and also since we started service. And those numbers are pretty impressive, that I send around every month to internal stakeholders.
Thank you. Next question is for Midori again. After using the CSC service, were there any standards in evaluating whether it was successful or not, and did they change over time?
I'm gonna probably go back to the reporting, because we started out with literally minimal brand protection. There was really nothing regular happening in that area. So we went from 0 to regularly taking down listings, and they change over time. The marketplace changes. So sometimes most of the listings will be eBay listings. Sometimes they'll be Redbubble. It just really depends. And we can customize those reports based on what we're most interested in. We can also see the most offensive users, the sellers, and how many listings those particular sellers had that we took down. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question appropriately, but that's what I got.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. This is a question for Alex. Even if you take down the sites that infringe copyrights, I think you end up going in circles very often. In order to prevent that from reoccurring, what kind of initiatives or measures need to be taken?
Yeah, good question. One other thing that we at ESA do is we try and build relationships with the third-party platforms that the sites are using. So, for example, we have contacts at PayPal. So I've had cases where I've sent up to 4 different PayPal accounts for one site because they just keep recreating PayPal accounts. And at that point, you want to have a contact that you can escalate to and speak both formally, but also be able to give those details behind the scenes. Because in most cases, it is infringing. And so having that escalation point is key. And I would, we've tried to build relationships with Google, and other third-party platforms, and that takes time. Sometimes they don't want to listen if they haven't dealt with it specifically in the video game space. So you just have to, and ESA's approach is to go in cordially, to go in respectfully and not shouting at them, because we realize at the end of the day, we're all humans, and using that respectful approach, we find gets those answers answered quicker than if we had a different approach.
Thank you, Alex. All right, let's move on to the next question. It's a question addressed to Marjorie. How do you need to deal with standalone websites? The hosting providers. So we usually report being hosted, but we hear nothing from hosting providers. So Marjorie?
For me, because I rely on my vendor to do that work. I don't do that work specifically. If I'm notified of a particular site that is selling something, I report that to my vendor, and they reach out and have those conversations.
I can actually help on this one because I send a lot of notices to hosting providers, and it is trying to say it without a cliche, it's a shot in the dark. Some hosting providers are good about taking things down, others are not. And I have found that, again, I would go back to trying to build that relationship with them. But there are sometimes certain sites that are sent to me from video game publishers saying, can you help action this one? And we look up the hosting provider. And as soon as I see the hosting provider, I can almost tell you whether it's going to be successful or not. That doesn't mean we don't try, but it is one of the trickier aspects, which is why ESA does that disruption strategy of going after other third-party platforms on the website and not just the hosting provider.
And if I could add, where, for example, working with Marjorie and Bungie, when we have to attack a hosting provider, this is where CSC as a registrar has an understanding of a large variety of compliance policy for the different aspects of what has a site being live. And Alex's sentiment on the frustration of dealing with, we call them bulletproof hosting providers in certain instances, where the hosts are non-responsive. That's where working with a third party like CSC helps, because we have the track record. We also have the resources to dedicate to being the squeaky wheel that gets the oil in the format that the hosting provider or whichever third party wants to have it in. So that is one of the reasons why, even though technically we don't have any different messaging than perhaps a gaming organization, because we send out literally thousands of these every single day, it becomes easier to take our call than to ignore it.
はい、ありがとうございました。今のご質問に対しても、
So to that question, CSC is working with, actually, we are answering this question with CSC and Bungie. Thank you for answering your question and also asking this question. So I think we answered the questions we received, so we'd like to close the Q&A session. And of course, if you have any further question, please type in the chat box. We're going to check those questions and we're going to get back to you later. Thank you so much. So that brings to an end of today's webinar. Thank you for every speaker, Alex, Marjorie, and Myrano Jenny. It was a really useful, productive time. We have a questionnaire for the audience. Those who are attending this webinar online, please answer our questionnaire. And that brings to an end to this webinar. Thank you very much for your participation. And we are planning next webinar, and I want you all to participate in our webinar next time as well. Thank you very much.